This video is sponsored by Squarespace. I've covered the GNU image manipulation program in 15 previous videos, but there's always been one thing about it that I really didn't like, and that is in GIMP, all the edits you made on your images were destructive. You couldn't come back to your curves and saturation days later after saving and continue adjusting them. You just had undo and redo in that session. In other words, GIMP's edits were baked in to your pixel data. Well, all of that has changed with the release of GIMP 3. All the options that I commonly use from the colors and filters menus in astroprocessing are now non-destructive, meaning they're added to the layer you're working on as layer effects that can be turned off and on with the eyeball icon, deleted, edited dynamically, and saved as part of your XCF file so you can return to these adjustments at any time and continue tinkering or deleting and redoing certain parts of your edit. Really a lot of flexibility here. And for me and my style of processing, this has made GIMP instantly 1,000 times better. So with this video, I want to do an edit along focusing on just GIMP and this new ability that it has. And I have a backlog of James Webb Space Telescope data that I've been wanting to take a look at. And I picked one here that I thought looked very dynamic. They called this the Serpens Nebula, named after the constellation it's found in. And they issued a really interesting news release about how this image, for the first time, seems to confirm that all these new stars being born spin in the same direction as the cloud of dust and gas collapses to make those new stars. And the visual evidence for this is in this image. It's these shock waves from the protostellar jets that show up in the infrared that the JWST specializes in. And you can see that these jets are all in the same orientation. And from an artistic perspective, I think this is a very dynamic photo with a lot of interesting color contrast and a really nice flow to it. And Elisa Pagan at STSCI did a wonderful job with the processing for the official release images here. To work on the data ourselves, you can download the data directly from MAST, the Mikulski Archive for Space Telescopes, and that's what I did. This is stage 3 data with these images, so it's already been mosaicked and cleaned up and everything, so it's not super hard to work with. But I have found that having PixInsight is pretty nice for working with JWST data, both for its robust star alignment features that really come in handy. And then there's also a script written by Joe DePasquale at STSCI that will fix the star cores that are clipped to black, which is really common with JWST data if you've ever looked at it. So I cleaned up the images with that script and with star alignment. And if you want to work on them in PixInsight, I've made a folder for that at the tiny URL. I also saved them though as FITS files so you can open them in Serial and play around with stretching. And for this data, I found that a very light hand with the stretch worked best because there are a lot of brighter parts that are easy to blow out if you're not careful when stretching. Hey, Editor Nico here. Since I mentioned Serial, I wanted to point out while I was editing this video, Serial released a brand new version called 1.4.0 Beta 1 that has a ton of new features that I do want to cover on this channel. But since I'm already in the editing process for this video, this will have to wait till next month. But I just wanted to point out that I am aware of Serial's new version. I do plan to make a video because there's a lot of stuff to dig into here. For the edit along in GIMP for this video, I'm going to start with the 3 files that I've already aligned and fixed in PixInsight and stretched in Serial with GHS. And those are available to download as TIFFs at this tiny URL and also linked in the description. So please feel free to follow along and to learn about GIMP 3.0. So I've downloaded the 3 TIFF files that I've already stretched. They're here on my desktop. And then I'm just going to go ahead and open up GIMP. And I've already downloaded the latest version, which is 3.0.2. And there we go. Looks very similar to the old GIMP, but we'll see the magic here in a second. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to open the 3 files that I downloaded, the TIFF files, as layers. So File, Open as Layers. And they're here on my desktop. So I'll go ahead and select them just by clicking the first one and then shift clicking to the last one. So all 3 are selected, and then click Open. And it will ask you about converting color profiles. You can just say convert. It really doesn't matter though, because we're going to change it to an RGB color profile pretty quick here anyways. And if for some reason they didn't open in this order with 210 on the bottom, 360 in the middle, and 480 on the top, you can just go ahead and reorder them like that. This will help us just sort of remember the chromatic order of the filters. Okay, and I find both this layer boundary dotted line and the rulers sort of distracting. So I'm going to turn those both off in the view menu. So I'm going to turn off view show layer boundary. That turns off that yellow dotted line. And I'm going to turn off view show rulers. And now we just have a nice clean canvas to work on. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, as I mentioned, is I'm going to change this to an RGB color mode. That is under the image menu under mode. You can see right now it is set to grayscale, hence the little check mark next to grayscale. So we're just going to change it to RGB because mostly what I'm going to be showing here is colorizing filtered data. And so for that to work, you do have to change the mode to RGB. All right, and the way that I always go about this is I start at the bottom and then move my way up. So I'm going to turn off the visibility of the top two layers, 360 and 480, just by clicking on their little eyeball icon to turn off the visibility of those two layers. And then I'm going to click on this bottom layer, the F210M.TIFF, so that that one is selected, and that's the one we're working with. I go in chromatic order, meaning that the lowest number, which is corresponding to a wavelength, is going to be blue. The middle number is going to be a green or yellow or gold, and then the top number, the highest number, is going to be a red. So I'm going to colorize these by going to Colors, Colorize. You can see as soon as I pick that filter, it automatically updates my view over here. And the reason I'm seeing that immediately is because I have these two top layers turned off. So if you choose Colors, Colorize, and it doesn't turn this teal color right away, make sure that you have these two top layers, their visibility turned off with the little eyeball icon. And I've found through experimentation that I like a little bit more of a royal blue, a little bit more of a natural blue here, and I like it fairly saturated. But you know, this, we can always change this later, and I'm going to show that, and it's going to be really cool. So don't worry about exactly picking the right color right now, but this is what I'm going to pick, is just sort of this nice rich blue color. And you can pick colors here by using a combination of this vertical rainbow bar here. This is helping you pick the hue. And then this larger rectangle over here is picking a combination of saturation and lightness, right? So if you wanted a very pure blue that's fully saturated, you go all the way in the upper right. I'm just going to back off just a little bit, but I'm not going to go down here, which you can see is barely saturated at all. All right. I'll click OK and then click OK again. And what I want you to note, if you haven't seen GIMP 3 yet, is this new little column over here in the layers panel called FX. And when you click on FX, you'll see that there's now this whole new pop-up window called Layer Effects. And here is our colorize filter that's been put on this layer as an effect. And we can actually turn off and on that filter. So in essence, this is how this new non-destructive editing works. But even better than just being able to turn it off and on, we can also double click on the name of the filter, and it brings us right back up that, that window. And you might think, well, that doesn't look how it looked before. Well, if you remember, actually, this is how it looked when we opened up Colorize, but then we got into the color picker by double clicking the color bar here. Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to the next layer up. So I'm going to turn on the visibility of that layer, and you'll notice, and then also select that layer. So click on the icon and also turn on the visibility. And you'll notice that when you turn on the visibility of this layer, it hides the layer below. And that is perfectly normal. That's how the layer panel works when you have a layer set to the normal blend mode, as this one is. You can see mode normal, and opacity is at 100%. We're going to be starting to blend these filter responses together. So I'm going to change it from mode normal to the screen mode. So click on the word normal, change it to screen. And then you'll start seeing some of this blue from the layer below come in. And the part that is being blended from this layer is sort of showing up right now as more black and white. But we're going to colorize this layer as well. So go back up to the colors menu and choose colorize again. And for this one, I'm going to pick a sort of greenish yellow color. Okay, I'm going to do something like this. I know that looks weird right now, but you have to add the red to get sort of the full effect of how all of these are going to blend. So I'm going to do something like that. Then I'm going to turn on the visibility and select the top layer, and again change its blend mode from normal to screen. Okay. And then I'm going to colorize it to a nice deep red. So we'll go to colors, colorize, click on this color bar here to open up the color picker. And I'm going to pick a nice, very saturated red color. All right. So just by doing that, we already have a very cool image, right? I can zoom in here. Here's those protostellar jets that look so cool, the red, all going in the same direction. And you can see that has a nice contrast with the brown and yellow with this mix. And then just down here, we have the nice blue. In here, there's a lot of complexity. This sort of looks like an interesting cavity. Okay, so this is a really good starting point. And in the old GIMP, what I'd probably do now is I'd go to layer, new from visible, and I'd start applying global adjustments that way. But I have found that in the new GIMP, it's more flexible to keep applying adjustments to these three layers individually, because that way we can see a little bit more clearly how the different filter responses are working together. And as we're editing them live, we can actually see, by bringing out more of the blue, is it hurting the browns and so forth. Like we can really just get a good idea live and go back and forth between the filters with these new editable layer effects in a really neat way. So let's try that out. So I'm going to add a curves adjustment to this bottom layer. Okay, and as I move this, you can see what it's doing, right? Okay, so first thing, if I just really bring up the blues like that, you can see there is a lot more blue sort of behind this brownish dust cloud throughout. That's looking cool. But of course, by just bringing up the blue with one point here on the curve, it's also slightly giving a blue cast to the whole thing. So instead, I'm going to do what's called an S curve by making one more point and bringing this part down. All right. And I can turn off and on the preview right here to see if I like that change. And I do. I think that that's adding a lot of neat dynamic in color contrast to the picture. But I think maybe I went a little bit too far. So I'm just going to bring it down just a little bit. All right. And I'll apply that. Okay. You can now see we have two layer effects. We have colorize and curves. And you also can move these up and down in the stack. I am not sure exactly if that's going to make any difference in this case. Oh, it did. That's interesting. So that's interesting. The order of the layer effects definitely makes an interesting difference. But I think I like how I had it. We're getting, if with curves on top, we're getting a little bit more of like purplish on the edges of the blue nebula, which I don't mind. The other way, though, feels like a little bit more on the green-yellow side, a little bit maybe. Well, in any case, I'm going to keep going with processing here. These are all you're getting sort of my thoughts as I form them here, so I'm not exactly sure where I want to go with that. But what's really nice is I'm often not sure in processing exactly where I'm going, but by being able to come back and turn things off and on to re-edit them, that is so useful for me as someone who sees this sort of as like an artistic kind of thing. I don't really just see it as I have a plan and I have to go step by step. I take it change by change, sort of thinking what I'm doing and what I want to see. But sometimes when you change something else, then it has an unintended consequence, and you might want to edit something else in the picture. So let's now go to the top layer here. And I'm just going to try to bring out those reds even a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same thing with this layer. I'm going to take the curves. I'm going to bring it up. Ooh. And then I'm going to do an S curve. Oh, yeah. Okay. And what I love now is we just applied that. I just did that pretty quickly. But I could go on to something else, right? I could go on to this middle layer, and we'll just add a little bit more contrast to that layer as well. Same kind of thing with curves. Maybe do a little bit more of a subtle one here. Okay, and then what I love is I can go back into this top layer and I can turn off and on that curve and see, is it too much, too little? What do I want to do with this? And when I first did it, it felt like a huge change. It felt like, oh, wow, that's so different. I really added so much more red intensity to the image. But now I'm looking at it, turning it off and on, and I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe I could go even a little bit further with that. So I'm going to open back up the curve. I'm going to see, okay, what if I add even a little bit more red intensity here? I think I like that even better. So that's just a small example, but it's what I love about this. You can work in this sort of non-linear manner, which I've gotten very used to from video editing. We call it a non-linear editor in video editing, meaning you can work on the timeline in any way that you want. You can start at the end. And that's what I sort of feel like this, finally, non-destructive editing in GIMP has gotten to us with photo editing, where you can work in whatever order makes sense to you. You don't have to do everything so step by step. So far, I've been doing all global adjustments on, and that might sound weird because I'm working on different filtered layers, but each of these edits has been to the whole layer, right? It's so they've been adjusting sort of different parts of the image, but that's only because we're using filtered data here. But my point is, sometimes with astrophotography, especially with a high dynamic range scene like this, we want to be able to edit selectively. So we want to, on a particular layer, only be working on a particular part of the image. And you'll often think of this as the masked kind of technique. So when you create a mask and you apply it to an image layer or an adjustment, that's when you're working selectively. So how can you do that with this new paradigm here of layer effects? Let me show you. So first, we're going to make a selection. And just for this example, I'm going to just do a freehand selection. So I'm just going to select this central part here. And you can do a lot with selections once you've made them in GIMP. I don't know how much I've covered this in past videos, but if you go to the Select menu, you can see there's all these different options here. And so one thing I often do with just a freehand selection like that is make it a huge feather value. So even a feather value of like 300 pixels. And that's just going to give it this very gradual fall off. The other thing that I'll often do is here in the Select menu, you'll see there's this option to toggle quick mask. Okay, you can also get that by pressing Shift Q for quick on your keyboard. And when you toggle that, it'll show you exactly what you have selected. So the part you have selected will show through, and the parts that you don't have selected will take on this red overlay. So this is already looking pretty much like what I want to have selected here. But let's say I wanted to refine it just a little bit. So I can grab my brush tool right here. And I'm going to use like a 60% opacity, very large, very soft brush. So I want hardness at 0. I'm going to use 1,000 pixel brush at 60% opacity. And then I can just paint right on the quick mask. And I can get this very nice soft edge into my selection just by sort of jiggling my brush along the edge of the selection like that. And there's a bunch of different uses for this kind of technique. I'm not going to belabor it in this video, but I just wanted to show that that's a cool thing you can do. To turn back off the quick mask, you can go to the Select menu or press Shift Q again. Okay, so we have this selection. Now, what are we going to do with it? Well, as soon as you go up here to the Colors menu or the Filters menu and you choose one of these, it will only apply that filter to your selection on the layer that you have selected. So let's pick this middle layer. I'm going to go to Colors. I'm going to choose Curves again. Okay, and just to show you that this is working, I'm going to do something very dramatic here. I'll just take the curve and I'll really raise it up. And you can see it made that selection very yellow because remember, this middle layer is colorized to that sort of yellowish color. But what I would use this for is something quite a bit more subtle. Just a very small adjustment to add a particular kind of contrast to that central region, or because it's a very bright part of the picture, maybe just to bring down the brightness in that region so we can see more of the complexity. Okay, so I'm going to apply that. Now notice your selection outline stays active, which I really like because this is actually something different than in Photoshop, where as soon as you choose an adjustment layer with a selection, it creates the mask on that adjustment layer, but the selection outline disappears. So I really like this because now I could go down here to this bottom filter, and using that same selection, I could adjust with curves the blue in this part of the image. So if I wanted to bring up the blue intensity a little bit in there, I could do that. Okay, I'm going to deselect now just by going to select none. And then we can go in here into the layer effects menu on each layer and see exactly what this did and see if we like it or if we like it better with it off. And you know what I'm finding is I actually do like what it did to the blue layer, the F210 filter, but I don't really like what it did to this middle layer. So I can either just keep this layer effect off with the eyeball off and decide later if I wanted it, or if I was sure that I didn't want this layer, I could select it and I could just press this little X right there and it just removes the selected filter. Okay, I'm going to do my classic thing of that I learned from someone else, I'm sure, but it's a very good technique, which is just you've been looking at your image for a while here and just look away from your screen. And, you know, if you have a window, which I have right now, just look outside at a nice brightly lit scene that's not your computer screen and let your eyes sort of rest, maybe close your eyes for a few seconds. And now look back at your computer screen. And just what is your first impression? If this wasn't my image, what would I think of it? And try to sort of think in this sort of critical mode. And I'm thinking I want those blues even more vibrant. I don't think that after the changes that we've made to the other two layers that the blue is really holding its own here in this image. So I want to go back here to the layer effects panel just by clicking FX. And remember this top curve is right here is the one that we made just on this little central region. And I can confirm that just by turning it off and on and see that that's true. Or if I am just unsure what this one is doing, I can turn it off and on and I can see, oh yes, this is the one where I intensified the blues overall. So this is the one that I want to edit to make it even more extreme. So I'm going to double click curves there. And I'm going to take this point that I made before and I'm going to raise it up even higher. And I can see that that is working nicely. The blue is now, let me move this over a little bit. This blue, especially right here in the center of the image, is now feeling a lot more substantial and holding up against the browns, reds, and yellows. But overall, I think it just maybe gave some of the outer peripheries just a little bit too much of a blue cast. So I'm going to take this one, this bottom point, and I'm just going to bring that down just slightly. All right, so I'm really liking how this is looking. What I would do at this point, if I was editing this for publishing it somewhere, whether it's social media or Astrobin or whatever, if it was my own image, I would save it as an XCF file. So you'd go File, Save As, and I'll call it Serpens JWST.xcf. I'll go ahead and save it. And I would sit on it for a day. You know, I would sleep on it basically, and then come back to it the next day and probably re-edit again because I usually I'm not happy with something after just my first try. Sometimes I'll actually even start over from the beginning, but with this new option in GIMP, I don't think I would do that as often. I think I would just come back in and maybe delete a few filters and redo them, or add more filters or do different things like that. I don't think I'd have to start over because this is a really good starting point. But when you're all completely happy with it, you can do File Export. And of course, GIMP supports all kinds of different file types. You can either just type in a file type here if you know what you want, like .jpeg, .png, .tiff, Or you can go down here to where it says select file type by extension. And here is the really long list of different file types that GIMP can export. So I'm going to do a JPEG. And you can see as soon as I picked it from the list there, the file ending changed to .jpeg. We'll click export. It gives you some options for quality and so forth. I'm fine with all of the defaults, so I'm just going to click export again. Okay, I'll quit out of GIMP and we can just see here. So here is our .xcf file. And just to prove it to you that it opens up with all of your filters still editable, I'm going to go ahead and double click it. It opens this up. And here's my little FX buttons. And look at that. I can still go in here and I can turn them off and on. All right, that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed. Just really wanted to keep it short and sweet, showing you the power of this new feature in GIMP, non-destructive editing, finally. Yes. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Squarespace makes it easy to set up and run your own personal website with your own domain. My Squarespace site is at nicocarver.com, and this site for me is just about having a professional landing page and online portfolio. So mine is fairly simple, but I think elegant and easy to change. If I ever want to change something about the design, Squarespace has an excellent design system called Squarespace Blueprint that makes that really easy to do. I also like that so much is built in, including a spam-free contact form and tons of selling tools. I haven't turned this on myself, but it's nice to know that if I ever want to sell prints or services through my website, that it's easy to turn on and set up, and customers can pay however is most convenient to them, whether it's PayPal, credit card, or Afterpay. So if you have a need for a website and want to try this out, head to squarespace.com/nebulaphotos for a free trial. When ready to make a first-time purchase of hosting or a domain, use code nebulaphotos at checkout for 10% off. And since this video is over 20 minutes long, you're now seeing the names of everyone who supports this channel on patreon.com/nebulaphotos. For everyone who already supports me on Patreon, thank you so very much. Between sponsors and ads and the support on Patreon especially, I'm able to run Nebula Photos full time as a solo creator, and that's been a blast the past few years. If you do join over on Patreon, there are a number of perks that I've split into different tiers. For instance, at the Seagull tier, $7 a month, you get all these videos that are published here on YouTube ad-free. So no YouTube ads, no sponsor reads, and I often also post them early over there. And everyone from $1 a month and up gets direct messaging support with me, a monthly Zoom call, and access to the Patreon channels on my Discord server. Well, till next time, this has been Nico Carver. Clear skies.